Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 269th episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter at HawkBlogger. And we are here tonight to talk about your Seattle Seahawks, who maybe you've disowned them. Maybe they're not your Seattle Seahawks after that week 1 performance. They're still mine, and they are somewhat of a disappointment. I haven't yet broken that news to them. That's a tough conversation to have, but man, that was a very deflating way to start this season. We will talk about it. Before we do, I will bring in Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11, also known as Bootleg Andy Reid. How are you doing, Nathan?
Oh, I was doing better until people compared me to Andy Reid, I guess. But I'm doing good. How about you? How are you, Brian?
You know what? I'm actually doing really well. I'm happy to be here and happy to be talking about my pain and suffering with good friends to work through it. I've been told that's an important thing. And so, yeah, I think I'm doing pretty dang well, all things considered.
I don't think Jeff got the memo.
Yeah, Jeff, you could turn off your background. We've got that covered for you now. We've moved to a new setup, no virtual background, so you don't have to worry about all that. Yeah, look at that. Much better. It's just you, dude. That's fine.
What are the pictures of on your wall there, Jeff?
I have the Michael Jordan shot over Utah. Another one is the Sopranos. All the main characters are playing some sort of blackjack or poker.
Nice.
On the other side are my Seahawks jerseys on the wall.
Who do you have?
I have a Russ. I have a Earl Thomas. I have a Matt Hasselbeck, a Lockett, and a Joey Galloway.
Ooh, very nice.
I need to know, that was the voice of our very own Jeff Simmons, at Real Jeff Simmons, who I think, I have to admit, Jeff, I am pretty convinced the reason the Seahawks played the way they did the first week of the season and we had such bad luck is that you were not part of our show last week. It felt very awkward to not have you there. And so it was very important that we found a way to get you here. And the only way we could make it happen was to push the pod back later, which is a little odd since we're on the West Coast and you are the opposite. How did your baseball game go?
It was the final game of our league, and it was a very stupid ending. And my team actually won the championship in one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. So the lights turn out at the park at a certain period of time, like automatically. So there's like a drop dead cutoff time where they won't play the game after that cutoff time. But earlier before that, there's also like a point where at a certain period, they won't do a new inning after a certain time. So we were up by 1 run going into like the 7th inning, which is the softball limit. And the clock hit that 8:40 cutoff time on the East Coast. And they called the game, didn't let us play the 7th inning. My team won, and like the least eventful victory I've maybe ever had. It was very odd.
That is a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think that is a good segue into talking about the way the Seahawks started the season. Very anticlimactic. As we get into that, I will remind folks, please give the show a like, subscribe to the channel, and go to patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up now, get instant access to the Slack channel where you can celebrate and commiserate 24 hours a day with other Seahawks fans in a very safe environment. Almost a padded room at this point, I think, might be necessary, but it's a really great spot. And also, Super Chat's back. So we had some really, really generous Super Chats recently, I think in the post-game show, over $100 in Super Chat, which is great. And as folks know, all of it goes to charity. So over $260,000 has been donated. You can be part of it and get a lot of benefits for doing so. So, all right. Nathan. Well, actually, Jeff, since you didn't get to talk at all last week, I'm going to start with you. You started into this season with kind of a low expectation. You felt like there wasn't a lot at stake. So I'm kind of curious, for someone like you, how did you feel after that game?
It's absolutely furious.
So it didn't help.
Did not help at all. I had low expectations for sure, but I still thought this was going to be a fun ascending team. And there was a lot of things I was excited about. I've talked about how much I wanted to watch the offense. And the fact that it looked like that, and they were that bad defensively, and they were that outcoached, and how easy it was for them. And it wasn't like the Rams. Like when there's one game against the Rams last year where John Wolford, they were doing all this creative, gimmicky stuff to get like Tutu Atwell in space. That I understood. Like that was frustrating, but I can understand that. But they were just running the basic Robert Woods route that they used to run on Seattle for years. And for them to be that porous defensively, and then for the offense to go into the tank too, I thought the coaches, especially, I think a lot of my anger was directed with the coaching, just how hopeless they looked defensively, especially in the secondary, which is supposed to be the strength of their defense. It was just so irritating because the one thing we all were like, oh, the run defense, Evan for weeks was like, this run defense is going to kill us all. That was their freaking strength of this game.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else went terribly wrong. And just the way they used some of their players was very frustrating to me. Like they have those three receivers and some of the, I thought Shane Waldron specifically did an awful job. And frankly, I just thought overall, like if you wanted to build a case of why Pete Carroll shouldn't be the coach anymore, that game had everything you wanted. Like every offseason decision, every familiar pattern. I found myself frustrated to that point where I couldn't do any work on Monday, even though I had no expectations. I was just so irritated watching that and just seeing how things kind of unraveled and how it could unravel going forward now. The game really beat me down.
That's a good transition into Nathan, who jokingly brought up, let's get back to the conversations about why Pete Carroll should be fired before this game. And somehow we all laughed that off, including Nathan. Like that's just a joke. And somehow that's exactly where we are 1 week after that game. Nathan, I'm always curious. You see things very differently. You often see things differently than I do or others do on the show. I'm kind of curious. What was that game in your eyes?
So my experience with the game was a little weird. I was flying back from Vegas for the our plane left at like 1:30, so we were boarding when the game started. I caught bits and pieces of it throughout the flight, and then I rewatched it. So I didn't have quite the emotional investment that you do when you're watching it, down by down and everything. I'm okay with it. I'm kind of at peace with it. I think my high level take here is that the things we thought they would be good at, they were bad at, like pass defense, offense. The things we thought they would be bad at, they were good at, like run defense. And so, you can look at that glass half full and say, hey, that's going to even out and the offense will swing back and the defense showed it can stop the run. And so that's a good sign, right? And, when we talked about this last week, we talked about, hey, how do the Seahawks lose this game? And I think the thing we all kind of talked about was, well, if Matt Stafford isn't cooked, if last year was the aberration, then this could be a feisty team. And Matt Stafford looked phenomenal. So, it's week one. And I'm tired of hearing that. Everyone on Twitter, it's week one, it's week one, it's one. But it's true. It's week one. We don't know what these teams are. And so I think if you were hoping for a big step, then this was probably a really big disappointment. But I think there's still, a lot of reasons for optimism, and it's a lot, a lot of games left. So I haven't gotten too worked up about it.
Yeah. A couple things that are interesting there. I'll just say emotion was there for me in a different way. My friend that I normally share season tickets with wasn't able to go, so I was able to take Isaac, my oldest, who happens to be home for a little bit before he starts his new job down in Portland. And that was kind of special to be able to go to week one. We got to go and have drinks and have pregame, and we were all looking forward to it. We started by watching the 49ers play the Steelers, and that was just terrible because like the 49ers looked as good on every level as you could ever hope for if you're a 49ers fan, and exactly the opposite of what you wanted for as a Seahawks fan. Every game in the morning was boring. Like there was no highlights. Everything was just like, this is really bad football. I wasn't enjoying it. And I just kept thinking, well, I'm just looking forward to the Seahawks. Just hopefully, like, we'll play a good game, and even if they don't play great, we'll at least get a win and move on from there. And it started off okay. Like Geno, it was very controlled, and he kind of like, methodically moved the ball down the field, and they were just looking like, okay, this is a very professional team. I was like, okay, it's not like the most exciting, but this looks like okay. And you even get to halftime, and you're still feeling like, man, the Seahawks really should be ahead by more. And this is probably going to widen in the second half. It feels like that kind of game. And then what the hell happened? Like, they come out, and I'm like, wait, why is Jake Curhan at right tackle? I immediately start tweeting and like, what the hell is going on? And Abe Lucas, he's got his helmet off on the sideline. Okay, maybe he's got a concussion. And then on that series, Charles Cross like limps, like it calls out and limps. And I'm like, oh God. And then I see him go in the tent, and I'm watching the game partially. And then I see the cart start to come out, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And he gets carted off the field. And then the rest of that game happens. And it's one thing to lose in week 1 of the season. It's one thing to underestimate an opponent that's maybe better than all the offseason that you thought it was going to be. It's another thing to have, like, underperformance or guys that you're excited about that don't play well or whatever, or maybe some slight injuries or bad coaching. But when you combine all of those things and you have pretty devastating injuries that also just, you don't get to say, okay, they'll regroup and play better next week. They might actually play worse. It was really deflating. Like I wasn't super mad. I was just depressed. I was like, I was so excited about this season. I was excited to watch it, and I couldn't find the thread to hold on to say, okay, it's going to be okay. There's still going to be a lot of fun stuff. Like, they still have a chance to recover. And I think that's probably an overreaction, but that's how I immediately felt after that game.
It's totally fair, because it was a weird week, and you kind of covered it there. Like, I have on the other side of this room, there's 3 televisions. I watched most of every game, and I can't remember a week like this. Nathan had it right. Like, I can't remember a week where so few teams came out of this week happy. Like, a lot of the best teams in the league lost. Mahomes, Burrow, Josh Allen all lost. And a lot of these teams, other than really San Francisco and maybe Dallas, came out of this week just like with their dreams crushed. Like Pittsburgh, their dream was crushed. Seattle, Chicago, the Jets lasted 4 plays. Like that, it was a strange week. And then of all the teams I watched every game. Nathan says, but Matt Stafford was the best quarterback I saw last week. And I underestimated him. I thought he was cooked at this point, and maybe the injuries had gotten him. And I did not think, and obviously the Seahawks lack of pressure helped, but that was a big deal. If Jared Goff plays that game for the Rams with that situation, I don't know if they win that game. But I think you're right. It's just the thing that's scary for Seattle is just the roster's built a very specific way, and so much of our hope this year was the offense. And when the 2 tackles come out, it could blow things up really, really fast. And every team has what's called sort of like a Jenga piece. There's that game Jenga. You pull a thing out and the whole thing collapses. There's a good case that Charles Cross was the Jenga piece for the Seahawks. And you see, like, Bosa is it for San Francisco. You pull him out, their defense is completely different. You pull out the left tackle on this team, and Geno Smith, who's not a guy who's played well when he's under pressure, and this thing could spiral pretty quickly. And you saw it last game. Their offense was anemic. And that's why I get where you're feeling, Brian, because they only looked hopeless, but almost every offseason decision they made kind of came to a head in that game. And it was hard to get excited after that.
Yeah, I haven't gone back. I'll probably try to, in the show, look at it. But, I mean, to look at the exact statistics under pressure. But Geno just didn't perform well last year when he was under pressure, in the second half of the season especially. So I don't know if it's no quarterback plays their best when they're under pressure. That's just a reality. But I'm wondering if Geno has it worse than most, or if it's a bigger difference. I'm going to kind of double check on that. But the idea that I think we took it for granted. Charles Cross and Abe Lucas played pretty much the entire season last year. I think Lucas might have missed one game or something along those lines, but otherwise they were always healthy. And during the preseason, the tackle play that we saw from the backup linemen that were in there was awful. Stone Forsythe, Jake Curran, like, it was really bad. And so we'll see about that. I am curious, Nathan, which team do you think had the worst week one? And I'll give you some choices. You can go off book, but there's the Seahawks. There are the Giants, who lost 40-0 at home. There's the Jets, who won but lost their quarterback and are stuck with Zach Wilson. Jeff said the Steelers. I think that's a fun one to add to the list. Anyone else that jumps out to you guys that you'd say is the worst week one?
The Bears didn't have the ugliest box score or like just total score, but that was a depressing game. And then the Bengals, I think, would be the other one. But, you know, Evan was quick on that one to say, hey, I'm confident the Bengals will figure things out. I agree there. I didn't watch much of the Dallas-New York game. That one obviously is the most lopsided. I did watch the Steelers get their ass absolutely whooped up and down the field. I mean, that looked like a college team playing a pro team. For just having watched it, I would say that the Steelers had the worst week one of anyone.
Jeff, what about you?
I'm going to go with the Jets. I think the Jets had legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, and to have it come crashing down in 4 plays. Like, I saw someone tweet out that it might be the most devastating injury in sports history. And like him coming out with the American flag and all that, and how good their defense looked. And they look at him for 4 plays. Another sneaky one is the Panthers. The Panthers don't have a first-round pick this year. They traded it away for the Bryce Young move up. They traded DJ Moore away. J.C. Horn ripped apart his hamstring. 2 of their offensive linemen, which was a big part of why they kicked Seattle's ass last year, are now out for the season. And they look really bleak. And if they're a team that looks really bleak, they have Bryce Young, but they have no skill position players. They might be out their best defender, and they have no first-round pick. They're giving that up to Chicago. Like, that is a bleak situation if things spiral for them.
A little bit I saw Bryce Young looked okay, though.
Yeah, he did look fine.
Yeah, I think I would concur with you about the Jets. That's kind of where I went. Is because the Seahawks don't really have Super Bowl aspirations this year.
No.
And the Jets do. The thing that I'm a little bit concerned with the Seahawks is, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I started having questions about their 2 to 4 year window based on this game, because let's look at it, look at piece by piece for a second. Geno had his worst game essentially since he's been named starter since last year. 112 yards or whatever it was. And if he's that, then the Seahawks have just lost the notion of having a franchise quarterback. And from a contract perspective, they could get out of it at the end of this year. So that's not that big of a deal, but you don't have a quarterback, and you just went through your draft where you had 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, and your chance of getting that quarterback is going to be harder, although there's a number of coming out next year. Offensive line-wise, Abe Lucas has got it sounds like it's a chronic knee injury, and I don't understand exactly what that's going to mean, and that's a pretty big concern of one of your 2 bookends. Charles Cross, turf toe, whatever. We'll see what that is. DK is another thing that's less long-term, but I mean, enough already with the acting like a 3-year-old out there and embarrassing himself and the team. I mean, honestly, that was just absolute trash human kind of behavior to knock down a former teammate that way, or knock down anyone that way in that moment. And this is a guy you're counting on to be a superstar for you in the biggest moments throughout that game. I don't know if they were showing it on TV. He was doing it throughout the game. He was after the play, trying to incite stuff, and that wasn't great. And then the secondary, man, like Trey Brown looked like shit. He looked really bad and made a lot of bad plays. And I don't think Mike Jackson's the answer. Kobe Bryant looked really bad. And so all of a sudden now you're like, okay, what do we have here? Like we're counting on Jamal Adams here. Is that our big 3-year plan? Like it just starts to and Draymond Jones, you just spent $17 million and this guy looks like he isn't worth $5 million. Like he was a nothing in that game. He wasn't even a factor that created opportunities for anyone else. And all your edge rushers looked like not that interesting. So like it was collectively just, holy shit, what does this team have that's above average? And it kind of brought me back to the question that Jeff, you and I have been talking about. Who's the blue chippers on this team? Who's got that ceiling? And it was like, nobody. Like, is that the answer?
That's what got me.
I know we're overreacting, but we're overreacting. Like DK's career is not over. I mean, this has been DK. This is what he's always done. And people have, we've been talking about this for a while. It's not going to change. And that's just who he is. That's fine. He can still be great. Tariq Woolen can still be great. Jordan Brooks looked awesome in a lot of that game. It's one game for Geno. The tackles thing is brutal. Like, Cross might have been the Jenga piece, but you also lost another, one of those pieces with Lucas. So that's going to be really difficult for them to navigate for the next few games until they get healthy again. But like they scored 13 points in the first half. That doesn't sound amazing, but that, if you can do that in 2 halves, it's 26 points. It's more than they averaged last year. Mm-hmm. And there is reason for optimism. I think that defense could be good for Jamal Adams if he's healthy. Witherspoon in place of Kobe Bryant alone, I think will be light years different, and he could do some cool stuff. Very disappointing. This could be a sign of a really miserable season. But we talked about this last week, right? I said this was the thing I didn't want to see. I didn't want to add this to the list of games like the Panthers game and the Raiders game and yada yada, and it definitely goes in that list. But they had those games last year and they made the playoffs. So again, if you were expecting that step forward, and I know Brian, you were, I get this is a big disappointment, but like the season's not over. So
yeah, and we'll start moving into some of that. I wanted to start a little bit with like just how low I like my mind went with some of this stuff, but the truth is I still don't really doubt that Geno is going to be good. I really I believe what I saw last year, and I think that that's going to happen again. I think it becomes a harder thing if he doesn't have protection.
I think the hardest thing about this was like Geno's been an awesome story, and I think Geno's a really good quarterback, and he led the league in completion percentage. He was number 1 in the NFC in touchdowns. Like
big hard time throws.
Hard to ask for a lot more from Geno last year, but watching him and watching Stafford in this game, you were like, oh yeah, okay. There's a talent difference here.
I don't agree. I understand that there's a big disparity in this. I put a lot of that on game plan. Like if you look at where the targets were in this game, they were all within 5 yards for the Seahawks. I don't think that's all Geno. I think that was the game plan. And the reason I say that is go back and put on the tape from a lot of Geno's games last year. This guy's making throws that almost nobody else in the NFL is making. So I don't think that I think he can make all those throws. I think that the game plan was absolute shit.
I agree. But there were 4 or 5 throws that Stafford made in this game that Geno's never making.
Yeah. I agree with both of you to an extent, but I have the same thought as Nathan. Stafford is an elevator. Stafford can make inferior players better. And like Kenny Golladay, that guy used to be on the Detroit, who was like a number 1 receiver. And he leaves Stafford and he's like out of the league in 2 years. And all these guys last week Russell, for his credit. Russell was really good at that, to his credit. Russell elevated guys. I don't know if Geno Smith is that player. I think Geno Smith is sort of the quarterback who's dependent based on who's around him. But I certainly agree with Brian. The way they called that game was pathetic. And the passing chart that I don't know if everyone's got a chance to see, the passing chart, they were playing as if they had a backup quarterback in. Their throws are all at the line of scrimmage. There's like nothing downfield. Mike Dugar was posting clips of just some of the stuff the Rams are doing in coverage. On almost all of those routes, there was not a single route running to the middle of the field, which is wide open. Jackson Smith and Jigba is not Zay Flowers. He's not the kind of guy you want to throw at the line of scrimmage and have him deke around people like Zay Flowers was doing in Baltimore. The way they used him and the way they were running route combinations with their personnel, their tight end group, they were barely running out of 12 personnel. Other than that one drive, which had some creative Walker runs and that shot that they should have hit to Bobo, I thought the play calling and the design, and that was one of the reasons I'm so frustrated. How can a guy who came from just a Sean McVay system, where they're so good at moving people around and so good at creating easy throws and routes, how come when we play, it looks like late career Alex Smith is playing quarterback?
Yeah.
And they're not taking any.
He just smothers all offense.
It's just, I don't know if it was a Pete thing. That's where I found myself so frustrated with the coaches, because these throws the Rams making are basic. Yeah, Stafford hit some beautiful ones, but these routes and the route combinations, I was so mad about that.
How can we be so bad at screens? I know we ask this like 10 times a year at least. It is mind-boggling to me how bad the Seahawks are at screenplays. Different quarterbacks, different OCs, different receivers, different running backs, different tight ends. And we can joke, it's Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is not teaching them how to or how not to run a screen pass. Like, it makes no sense to me that they don't know how to run a screen. And everybody else in the NFL has these simple, God, we could even go back to Darrell Bevel and say, well, at least Darrell Bevel, when he ran those stupid wide receiver bubble screens, they'd get 7 yards. Like, they weren't beautiful, but there was something there. Like, they lose yards on half the screenplays they run.
Just evidence of how amazing Jermaine Kearse was. We all thought we were all so frustrated by those plays, but look at what we get without him.
Yeah.
Yes. I did mean to take a moment. Evan Hill had wanted me to read Evan and Dana both would want me to read a statement. Evan's statement was, people are going to blame this game on Pete Carroll and the coaching. They shouldn't. Pete Carroll did everything that he should, and that this is really, no one should be upset about this game. In fact, he thinks that they should extend Pete Carroll after this game, which was a surprise. I don't know about you guys. I was surprised that Evan felt that way. Dana, on the other hand, thought, man, they should cut Bobby Wagner after this game and that Pete Carroll should be fired. I thought that was remarkably negative given what we know of Dana, but had to share.
She was DMing me on the side, and you wouldn't believe the stuff she was saying about Quandre Diggs.
Oh, my, that's right.
So
I forgot that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
This game broke a lot of people.
Unbelievable. And there's going to be people that believe I'm serious. So, who had the best week? Which team had the best week in the first week in the NFL? Maybe relative to expectations or just in general?
San Francisco. They just look like what Nathan said. They look like a college team playing against one of those 40-0 blowouts. And Seattle's supposed to be that team nipping at their heels. And they get beat by 30 points at home. San Francisco just looked like they were at a different speed than everyone else. I'm sure there's some other answers that you can come up with, but to me, just watching them out and just throwing Nick Bosa back in there, they're good at everything. It's terrifying.
What happened in the Dallas game? Because I have Dak on my fantasy football team, and I saw that the score was like 33-0, and I was like, oh, hell yeah, this is going to be good. And then I looked at, and he got me he threw for 150 yards. What happened in that game?
It spiraled very quickly. There was a blocked kick early in the game, and the Giants couldn't block Parsons at all. And the defense just they couldn't get going on defense. And they had 2 blocked kicks. They had a return touchdown. The Giants are not a team who can play from behind. They don't have skilled players. And Dallas is D. And if you're Brian, you're the biggest Dan Quinn guy you can think of, this had to depress you because they just absolutely manhandled the Giants offense, especially the offensive line. Daniel Jones, he might have had a worse week than Geno. And Dak didn't really have to do much. Tony Pollard was running a little bit, and it was just the game spiraled so fast. It's one of those games where just things get out of control. And Dallas has that ability. Dallas is a good pick for that question too. They went 40-0 on the road. Oh man. And it's frustrating for me. You watch Dan Quinn and you see Cleveland Cleveland brought in Jim Schwartz, and you see the instant impact of one of these top coaches, one of these top coordinators, and their defense looked incredible against Joe Burrow. And then you see Seattle, who's got Clint Hurd, and they can't cover a basic pass. It's a tough week, man.
Yeah, I think Dallas is probably where I would go, and partially because I thought the 49ers are potentially exactly what they showed. It was just frustrating to see it. Dallas doing that against a division opponent on the road, I think that they put Philadelphia on notice because the Eagles didn't play that great in New England, and Dallas is going to go after that division. That division just got much harder. And for the 49ers, it's like, oh, sweet. This is going to be like the 2005 division in the NFC West that the Seahawks faced, where everyone was under 500 and the Seahawks got to dominate. So, yeah, I think I would go Dallas. I think, by the way, a team on that list is Detroit. It was an excellent first week. They did benefit from some absences on the Chiefs team, but to go in and beat Patrick Mahomes, I don't care who you are, what the situation is, to beat him in Kansas City in week 1 doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, and they did that. So I give them a ton of credit for that.
Yeah, another one on one of the worst weeks, it would be our old friend, the Denver Broncos. Russell did play a lot better, but they scored 3 points in the second half against the Raiders and lost at home. In Sean Payton's big debut, Russell Wilson their offense had 3 points in the second half against one of the worst defenses. And this new Sean Payton thing looked a lot like the team last year that lost at home to an inferior team.
Yeah, I think Russell playing a lot better was a little overstated. I think he averaged like 5 yards a throw. So, I think he had like 150 yards passing or something. It was he had a couple touchdowns though. So I'll give you that. All right, Nathan, are you going to look up Patreon questions? Are you going to pull those up?
Yep.
Awesome. While Nathan's doing that, I will just say good time to give the show a like, click subscribe, and go to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, get immediate access to the Slack channel where you too can ask us questions every week. We will not get to every question, but we will get to as many as we can within a reasonable amount of time. And we also are doing game ticket giveaways. I will say there's a high likelihood that I've heard from a birdie that we will have 2 tickets to the Seahawks versus the Panthers. We will be giving away to a lucky patron. So patreon.com/hawkblogger. Join now, get access. Let's have some fun. All right, Nathan, let's take a few questions.
All right. Brian, we have a question for you. How do you see Seattle trying to neutralize Detroit's pass rush? We talked about, and he says, I've never seen any of the Seattle offenses the past 8 years utilizing the screen game effectively, which is one way teams will look to punish the pass rush. How do you see Seattle surviving with a couple backup left tackles?
Well, it's interesting because I had the same kind of impression that maybe the Lions had a better pass rush because I think everyone thinks about Aiden Hutchinson, and he had 7 pressures last week, and that was good on the road. How many sacks do you guys think that they had in Kansas City? Any guesses? They had 24 pressures. How many of those turned into sacks?
1,
2.
Goose egg. 0 sacks. So I think Aiden Hutchinson is a really solid pass rusher, and I think he can be a problem. I don't think this is a multi-headed like pass rush. So I think that allows you to run away from them, roll away from them. I think it allows different play action and boots. And I think that it also, one thing I will say about Jake Curhan, when he started 5 games at the end of like the 2021 season, I want to say, the Seahawks ran for almost averaged over 200 yards rushing a game. So what do you do when you don't have the guys that you want? You play to their strengths. Jake Curhan is a mauler. You put him next to Phil Haynes, and you maybe play a little more 2 tight ends, and you run. And so that might be a big part of what the Seahawks try to do. Oh, one other thing. I do think there's a chance that they do the exact opposite and play more spread. For receivers, quick pass, and not give the rush a big chance to get home. So those are the 2 things I think might happen.
That was from Kalyana Raman. Next question from Mark Zuck. Jeff, do you think it's time to drop the idea that Witherspoon will play nickel? Both Trey and Mike Jack have had struggles. Do you think Trey Brown, Mike Jackson's play is going to change Seattle, what we believe Seattle is going to do?
Yeah, I think those guys open the door right there for Witherspoon. And obviously, Witherspoon, it comes down to whether he can practice a full week, but I just think his talent, his upside, even the way the coaches are talking about him, I think the door is wide open for him. Trey Brown had what looked like a great camp, but he just looked second rate in that game. And his tackling was really bad. And on a team that just needs playmakers and studs and those blue chip players, I think Witherspoon's going to be – he might be an every down player this week. And they're playing one of the best middle of the field receivers. So they're going to be a nickel a lot to cover St. Brown. And so I think he's going to be a combination of outside and inside. But I think that idea of maybe Trey Brown running away with it and keeping Witherspoon off the field, I might have gone out the door pretty fast.
Brian, I think this is a soapbox one for you from Nick S. Is our home field advantage gone? Seems like opposing offenses aren't really bothered by the noise anymore, or is it more a sign of how bad our defense has been?
You know what? My like the initial answer is absolutely. Like this, the proof's in the win-loss record over the last few years, and I don't think the Seahawks play significantly better at home than they do on the road. That said, if the Seahawks have a very good defense, then I think that the advantage becomes much more pronounced. It's not like I don't think that Seahawks fans know how to create an advantage. I just don't think that there's a team that really is equipped to take advantage of it. And I think that kind of builds on itself. So I don't think that we've lost the ability to do it. But the reality is we don't have one right now. That is just the truth.
Jen wants to know, is it time to put Clint Hurt on the hot seat?
Absolutely. I thought he had to be on the hot seat coming into this year after how abysmal they were defensively. And they made some very clear scheme changes. They played more 4-3 this week. And a lot this season is dependent on what this defense does. And so much of our effort went into the defensive line. And the fact that they look that bleak and that much of a pushover in the secondary, his job has to be in jeopardy. And like I said before, like you see some of these defensive coordinators around the league come in and just, you see the impact, you see the scheme, you see the coaching, you see their impact. Like Jim Schwartz comes in and obviously they have Myles Garrett and a killer defensive line, but you see that wide nine and you see the system. And with Clint, you don't know what he is. You don't know what they do. And their defense has really done nothing well the last year in one game. So what is Clint Hurt's mark other than being a Pete Carroll guy? He came up as a defensive line on the defensive line that's been terrible. If he's not on the hot seat, that's a big problem for me.
Their run defense was pretty good.
It was.
We'll say that much. So, yeah, something to watch there. Okay, Brian. Michael Mathis has a long question. So I'm going to summarize here. It's no secret the Rams game changed a lot of people's outlook on the season. We talked about this quite a bit. But his question is there a way that this team can redeem itself? Is there anything that Seattle can do against Detroit that is going to you talked about how, like, not only is this season done, but they're never making the playoffs for the next 10 years. So how does the Ram game get you back on the Super Bowl train? Or sorry, not the Rams game, the Lions game.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. A win this week would be a significant step because it seems highly, highly unlikely. And so what would that mean? It would mean that they would have to find a way to create an offense without their two starting tackles. And if they can start to do that against a team that's on the come and excited on the road in their home opener, then they should definitely do that against Carolina in the following week and be back at 2-1. And then you're going to go into Cincinnati and a Cincinnati team that we don't know exactly what they are. And maybe you can get to 3-1. So I think that and then you got a bye week.
It's actually the Giants first.
What's that?
It's actually the Giants that's the fourth game, not Cincinnati.
Giants.
Easier
oh yeah,
match.
the Giants just had a pretty crappy. Yeah, so I think there's a path to getting to that bye week and then getting your tackles healthy. Jamal Adams comes back. So I think all that could be true. And then the other thing that really has to be there, I think it's a must at this point. Witherspoon has to be a really good player. If Witherspoon is a difference maker and he comes in, things could change. So, like, those are the two top, and then any kind of freaking pass rush. My God, knock the fucker down. I'm so sick of watching them down. They're just, somebody hit him. All those things would help.
All right. Last one I'll do for both of you from Jason. Jeff, you can go first. Which of the new offensive linemen are you most impressed with? I'm assuming he means the ones that we saw play last week and not the ones that they just signed.
The new offensive lineman.
Yeah, I guess it's really only Brown is only.
I was gonna say, is that Evan Brown, or is he talking about the ones that they picked up off the street today?
I guess. I mean, all right. Let's do this. Jeff, what do you think of Evan Brown?
I thought he was fine. I didn't think he was special. I don't think he was a liability. I don't think he got pushed around. He was he was fine. Nothing exactly how he was advertised. He wasn't a difference maker. He wasn't a liability, and he held up relatively well. A lot of Aaron Donald's pass rushes came from the edge and from some different spots, and that was a big assignment. I don't think he blew guys off the ball or anything. I don't know what his PFF grade was, but to me, he was competent. Nothing special, but did his job.
Okay, Jason is in the chat and clarified the ones we just signed. Do you have opinions on any of the guys we just signed? Do we want to jump into that yet?
Not really. I'm going to be honest.
Do you want me to give you guys a little bit on those two guys?
Yeah, like these are guys that were preseason emerging guys that I wasn't watching the Bucks and Raiders preseason.
So first is Raekwon O'Neal. This was from UCLA, undrafted free agent, picked up by the Tampa Bay Bucks onto their practice squad. 6'4", 300 pounds. He's essentially a left tackle, and had the 2 games he played. 2 games at left tackle, 1 game at right tackle for the Bucks, and it counted himself really well. His first game, 82 overall grade, 86.7 pass block, 78.2 run block. Overall, he was 82.5 across 3 games, 79.7 for pass block, 81.5 for run block. So I've looked at a lot of offensive lineman grades. Those are pretty good. And so that's interesting. McClendon Curtis is a big boy. He is 6'6", 325, and he has played at the Chattanooga, the Mocs. And he was on the Raiders practice squad. So he is more right tackle. He also plays guard. His preseason was much fewer snaps. I mean, he got the most snaps he got in any game was 10. So this is a guy not getting a lot of snaps, but in those snaps, he played pretty darn well. His first game, 93 overall grade, 75.1 pass block. Every one of his games was 75 or greater in pass block. So better pass protector. He also had a 90.2 grade in run block his first game. So he finished his preseason with an 88 grade, 86.2 run block as well. So interesting guys. And honestly, I'd rather see some guys figure it out on the field than Stone Forsythe. I think has a very limited upside. I'm kind of done with the Stone Forsythe thing.
I think Corbin was talking about Curtis, and I think he has so he's got a pretty good athletic profile too, a 7.74 RAS, which is good. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's real solid. So
yep.
I think that covers.
What about Jason Peters?
What do you guys think is going to happen? So Jason Peterson's going to play this week. They signed him, 41 years old. What did you guys think about the fact? So first of all, thanks for Patreon questions. Patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up, join the crew. What is the deal? So Charles Cross does not go on IR today. Abe Lucas does. That means they think Charles Cross might come back sooner than 4 weeks. Is that surprising to either of you?
A little bit, but I mean, who knows, right? It's so hard to predict injury stuff.
Yeah.
I think the more surprising thing is that they signed 3 tackles and didn't put them on IR.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was a little bit surprised that happened. And it sounds like Jason Peters won't play this week. So we're going to get Stone Forsythe and Jake Curran in this game. Yeah? Is that your expectation?
I would think so, but I mean, they have to put these 2 guys, what is it, O'Neal and Curtis. I mean, they're on the 53, right?
They did have to sign them to the 53.
Yeah, they're both on the 53.
Yes.
So it's not impossible, but you would think that those 2 would start. And then if Curran plays like he did last week, then he's probably gone by the first half, then start of the second.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough. And I think back in the Holmgren days, I would have known exactly what a Holmgren would have done. He would have left tight ends in. He would have been very conservative on offense. Pete Carroll seems to do the opposite of what you'd expect. So I don't know what he's going to do, but we'll see there. Jamal Adams is back practicing, limited. If you haven't already picked up on it, there's a very obvious pattern to what the Seahawks have done throughout all of training camp, which is they bring guys back for 1 week. They do limited. They kind of do walkthroughs and, the basic stuff. And then the second week is when they go full go, and then they come back and play. Witherspoon was that last week. He'll go this week. Jamal Adams is limited this week. I think that gives him a decent chance of actually going full go next week. I don't think there's other changes. Do you think Trey Brown, that there's enough that they would change Trey Brown and Mike Jackson? Do you think that Devin Witherspoon could potentially jump them both and play outside? Curious what your thoughts are. Jeff, I'll start with you. Actually, Nathan, let's start with you. You just asked a bunch of questions.
I'm sorry to answer that one.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question's a little moot because I have always kind of thought that if there's only 2 corners on the field, it'll be Woolen and Witherspoon. And then Witherspoon will move in when they play nickel, which will be a lot of the time. And so you're still going to have Mike Jackson or Trey Brown out there. Now that could change when Jamal Adams comes back, and you could play nickel type looks with Adams as the nickel. So you've got Love and Diggs at safety, Adams playing nickel, maybe against bigger packages and things. And then you have Witherspoon and, Woolen out there, but that's not going to be the case this week. So I don't think Mike Jackson will end up stealing a lot from Trey Brown. I don't know that Mike Jackson's done anything to really. I don't think Trey Brown was that bad, and I don't think Mike Jackson's done anything to really deserve jumping him yet. So I don't know how much any of that really changes this week.
All right. If you're wondering why I'm kind of seeming distracted, it's because I've been trying to figure out the difference between quarterbacks when they're pressured and not pressured while I'm talking to you guys. And I just figured it out, at least from last year. You guys want to know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the biggest difference was Mac Jones last year. Second was Trevor Lawrence, then Sam Howell, then Matt Ryan, Kyler Murray, Zach Wilson. So you get down. Tom Brady was actually one of the biggest last year. Geno Smith was not one of the biggest. He was like all the way down at like 33rd. So it wasn't, I mean, as much as I think it was he went from an 87.5 grade to a 59.5 grade. That's significant difference, but it's
Pretty big
not.
drop.
It's not as big as other guys. So anyway, I think maybe like Brock Purdy was a much bigger difference. He went from 87.2. Sorry, yeah, he went from 87.2 to 50, as opposed to 59. So happens to everybody. Lamar Jackson, by the way, Matt Stafford, bigger difference. Went from, in this case, an 80 grade to a 44 grade. Although last year was a bit of an off year. So sorry, I was a little distracted. I couldn't help myself. I really wanted to figure that out and thought I could do it quickly. All right, let's talk about this game real quick. Bobby Wagner gets the team together in practice today, yells at him, tells them that they got to play with more energy. Do you think that this is a game that if Bobby Wagner and Geno and Quandre Diggs and Pete Carroll, like they lead them really well, they get high effort, how much is that worth in this game? Like, is that they gonna get him all the way to a win? Nathan, like, what's your read on what it would take for them to win and how much mentality is going to be a big factor?
I didn't feel like effort was a problem last week. So like I don't think there's some big turnaround that they're going to get just from playing harder. Like they seemed to play hard last week. So I can't see that being a big deal.
Jeff, do you feel differently at all? Like that's probably what I'm asking, because I was like, I appreciate that Bobby's doing that. Do I really think that that's going to make a big difference? I don't know.
No, I'm with Nathan on that. I didn't see that. I thought like Tyler and DK looked kind of lackadaisical and looked kind of just they weren't very good, frankly. Like they weren't getting open. And talking to like Griff and some of the film guys, they said like just looking at those two, they looked horrible. But I don't think effort is the issue. I think just in terms of like a chess match and the matchups, they're going to have to win some matchups where they're really playing uphill. And like their biggest weakness last week was they did not cover the middle of the field. That Nate Tice put out that passing chart, and the way they pepper the middle of the field seemed very planned. And they're playing the best middle of the field receiver who comes from the Rams concepts in the league. Amon-Ra St. Brown just eats up the middle of the field. Maybe the Seahawks want to run a route to the middle of the field this week with Jackson Smith and Jigba. That would be a nice start. But again, the offensive line of Detroit with Sewell is really, really good. They have Sewell. They have Frank Ragnow. It doesn't look like Taylor Decker's going to play, so that's a helpful. But I think Brian mentioned in his column preparing for the week, like they have the offensive line that we've wanted the team to build and be that bully. So and the biggest thing about this game is I don't think it's effort. It's Jared Goff has a very clear pattern of when he's good. And I know Dayna was writing in our chat last week, like Goff looks great. And to me, it's the same story. And he's landing in a really good spot for him because of how good their offensive line is. But when Jared Goff is not under pressure, he can tear you apart. And he did it for the Seahawks for years with McVay. And they're not as good as McVay. But if Seattle can't get a pass rush, they're probably going to lose the game. And I don't think it's effort. I think their pass rushers have to just be better, or they need to scheme a little differently. And they need to stop the run as well against a really, really good offensive line that's big and strong. And Penei Sewell is one of the best at his job in the league. And so effort to me is like, if I were ranking things, it would be, I think coaching has to be a lot better. Yeah, I think Bobby should have gone over to Pete and Hurd and Waldron and screamed at them.
But I like that. I mean, that would have been awesome.
Oh man, like Pete
Sherman would have done that.
Yeah, Sherman would have. Doug would have.
Yeah.
I think the coaches and I think the schemes and I think the game plan. I think the game plan needs to be significantly better than it was last week. But they got some really hard matchups for their limitations right now. It's going to be hard.
Well, so I mean, we'll get to predictions here in a minute. I mean, I don't think the Seahawks are going to win this game. If I wanted to paint the picture of what it would take for the Seahawks to win, I would think about things like Quandre Diggs going back to Detroit. I think you can get a little bit more out of him, and maybe he's part of the answer in creating a turnover. Reek Woolen did have a pick 6 against Jared Goff last year, and maybe there's something there. Devin Witherspoon, if he can be the guy to match up against a guy like he's exactly Amon-Ra St. Brown is exactly the kind of receiver that the Seahawks have not been able to cover well. And if Witherspoon can be part of the answer for covering a guy like that, that could be big, especially if he's also someone who has shown some propensity to blitz well and, create turnovers and be, like an energetic player. And then you need to have some sort of good fortune on the pass rush. And maybe it's this right tackle that is out. Taylor Decker is going to be out, and maybe you're able to, turn something out. So I do think the defense to me is a huge part of this. I think that it's a lot to ask for the offense to put up 30 points. So I think that you got to be able to have a defense that holds this team low 20s at highest, I think, to have a realistic shot to win. And for that to happen, I think all these things I just mentioned have to be part of the equation. So I don't think it's crazy, but I don't think it's likely. So
I think I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think it's what you said earlier. I kind of think it might have to be the running game.
Whoa.
I know.
Hold everything.
But that running attack that they had at the end of 2021 with Rashad Penny and Jake Curran out there was really, really good and like better than a lot of passing offenses good. I don't know that they can recreate that just by sticking Curran back out there, but we've seen this team, have some explosive runs and things, and so maybe that's how they can keep up on offense, and and if they can just keep it together well enough in pass protection, then maybe that's how they get a shot here.
One more thing on this. So there's this weird thing about that game with the Rams where the Seahawks defense actually did like kind of okay other than third down. Like they were just epically bad on third down, but they forced a lot of
long. It was second. They were good on first down. They forced a ton of second and longs, and the Rams were just converting them or turning them into third and shorts.
I saw that there was a lot of third and fours.
That first drive, there was four of them.
Like these weren't a lot of third and ones. Mm-hmm. Like there was a lot of third and fours, and even if they were succeeding on second down, I just felt like third and four should not be a 70% conversion rate kind of down and distance. So anyway, maybe there's something there. Like it just felt like it always kept coming up to pass pressure on third and short, and that they couldn't get home. Maybe there's an answer there. So who knows? But man, it does feel like a heavy burden to ask this team to go and win on the road in Detroit this week. But let's go ahead and get to predictions. Oh, go ahead.
One more thing. I don't remember if it was Jeff or you, Brian, that said it. I think it was Jeff. Like, I don't think the Rams win if they had Jared Goff instead of Matt Stafford. And great news, the Lions have Jared Goff instead of Matt Stafford. And so, maybe some of those more special plays that Stafford has, like Goff's not making those. And so maybe it stays a lot closer and doesn't at least get so ugly.
I think the chat is loving Nathan's embrace of the run game.
I'm not saying I want them to lean on the running game, but if they could recreate that rushing attack from 2 years ago now, that would be just fine by me.
All right, let's get to predictions. Jeff, you get to go first as you were absent last week. Give us a score and a winner in this game.
I'm not there with Seattle yet. Their tackle situation is so bleak. And I think Cross and Lucas are so important to what they do. I said before the year, like the key to the season was about their offense being at a championship level. And once those tackles came out, they looked like one of the worst offenses I've ever seen. So I think they will be better. I don't know if they're going to get punked and blown out, but I'm saying Detroit just has the edge in terms of those matchups. It's unfortunate that it works this way. I'll go 27-13 for Detroit. If you remember the Lions game, we all remember how good Geno Smith was. We talked about that Carolina game and that Raiders game. Seahawks defense against Detroit last year was horrific. Like TJ Hawkinson was like running free down the sidelines, and Jamal Williams had like a 66-yard run for a touchdown, and they couldn't cover it. That was like the Cody Barton at his worst. So
I was going to say Hawkinson wasn't running completely free, but
yeah. Josh Jones was playing, and Cody Barton was running the wrong way, and they played awful on defense last year. So I'm hoping the coaches cut it loose a bit. I'm scared they're going to just rein Geno in and have that like offense they had like against San Francisco last year, where they don't let him do anything. I think for them to win this game, they got to cut it loose, get a little more aggressive on defense, blitz a little more, attack them. They sit back. I don't think they have the horses to win this game.
Nathan.
I am going to say I'm trying to decide. All right. I'll go with my more boring one here. 21-20 Seahawks.
What? That was your more boring one?
Yeah. Very boring. Yeah. I was trying to think like, dude, I mean, because it's Pete, and whatever you think is going to, like, I want to zag. I'm trying to zag with Pete here, but I'm going to go boring. I'm going to say something more simple. I'm going to say 21-20. I think, I think the defense looks better, and I think the offense just finds enough. And I think, I don't know, man. I just can't quite buy into Jared Goff yet. I know this. There's a lot to like about this Lions team. I know there's a lot to like about Jared Goff, but I just can't.
They didn't play very well. I know everyone wants to crown them. The Lions kind of played like shit.
I mean, if Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney don't drop 82 passes, some into Lions.
Yeah, their offense looked slow, man.
Yeah. I really hope with all of my heart that this time next week probably not, because I'll be flying home from New York, but when we do our next podcast next week, that we are talking about how stupid we sounded to be so down on the Seahawks, that we had so much confidence before the season and all this talent that they had and all the things that we're building, and that we let it all get shaken with one game. It was week 1, and look at the Seahawks. What they just did on the road to Detroit. We shouldn't have felt the way we did. That would be so awesome.
They were about to run away with that game, and then their tackles get hurt in the second half, and it took an unbelievable Matt Stafford performance, and we lost complete sight of everything and just freaked out like the emotional fans that we are.
I would love to like have the chat just be giving it to us, like beating us up about that.
I'm looking at the chat. They're not going to have any room to speak if that happens. All right.
But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think that the Lions are a better team that is better coached right now, better prepared. I think they are feeling the upswing of decades of irrelevance and building a team the right way on the defensive and offensive line. And in some ways, I don't hope for it against the Seahawks, but I really want the Lions to have a good team. I like that team. Something about them I like. I won't be cheering for them this week in any way, shape, or form, but I do like the way that team's coming together. And I think that they're gonna give the Seahawks all sorts of problems. So I think this one probably goes in the category of like 30-7. Something along those lines, or 30-9. Let's go 30-9. I think it'll maybe be field goal type of game for the Seahawks. And we'll be licking our wounds at 0-2 next week, with the season completely hanging in the balance when they come home to play the Panthers. So I don't like saying those words, but I have to be honest with how I think things are going to go. Thank you to Nathan Ernst at NathanE11 for joining, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons for joining late. It is now tomorrow for Jeff out there in the Eastern time zone. Appreciate you staying late. Congratulations on your rousing softball championship. I'm Brian Nemhauser at Hawk Blogger. You can find me there. if you haven't already, give the show a like, subscribe, click, and join patreon.com/hawkblogger. Slack community, potentially free tickets to a game. It's a good time. You get to ask us questions, and we will see you there as well. Until then, folks, enjoy a pajama, wearing Sunday with a morning game for your Seahawks. And who knows, with no expectations, hopefully you can only beat that. So let's see if maybe they can even give us reason to feel good about this team. We'll see. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Go Hawks.